Okay, welcome everybody. There's probably about 5 hours of work in this workshop, so I'm going to try to demo a good number of the things that are on here. Just a summary of the handouts. The cover page is two-sided. The first side is primarily solo work, and then we get into duo routines, and then that's when I'll ask a couple of guys to come up and try some interactive duo type routines. The notated handout, the first is sample exercises which correspond to the written handout. And we'll be going through a good many of them. The next handout is the symmetrical interval exercises exercise, which goes in the interval section. Those of you who have taken your training 1B with me have probably encountered these. And then finally, if we get to it, is the Bach chorale. And the idea here is to sing one line while playing the other. And do all the permutations. And then when you have another player, then you can do all four parts and do all the permutations. So if we can get to that, that would be great. If we don't get to that, at least it's part of the work that we expect you to do for this workshop. So anyway, everything's very self-explanatory. Our instrument is very tactile, it's very visual, it's very intuitive, and we end up, as I did, being very ear heavy and chop heavy, and notationally and theoretically, bereft of any understanding. And so I had to come up to speed when I got to college and learn notation and theory and all of that. But the thing is, I had the benefit of my ear and guitar connection being very strong, because that's all I had to go on. What often happens during our development at different stages is that when we're shedding certain vocabulary, it becomes more of a technical issue, and our ear hasn't quite caught up. So when we're blowing, but are we really playing what we're hearing? I mean, that's ultimately the truism that we have to ask ourselves, each one of us individually. Are we really being true to what we're hearing, or are we playing the stuff that we've kind of worked out? The idea here is to then take the guitar the way you would use a piano, as a reference instrument and a way for solidifying and coalescing the connection with the voice and the ear and the guitar, so that it becomes a working, dynamic environment for you to bring things back into balance. So that if your ear is trailing your technique, if your voice is kind of uncultivated, but you have a good enough range to start working with it, it's a great opportunity, because having a usable voice not only can help you hear things better, absorb improvisational vocabulary better, but also you never know when you're going to sing background on someone's recording that you're playing guitar on, and say, yeah, I can sing some background. So in any event, there's a little bit of an aside there. So anyway, what I'm going to do is go through some of the solo routines first, and then I'll ask a couple of the guys to come up and try some interactive, fun stuff. So first with intervals, okay? This was intended to be done with a metronome, but you should always try and work with a metronome whenever possible, so that you have some kind of tempo, flow, and accountability. And it also makes the routines feel very solid when you're going through them. First thing, very important, always sing in the same octave as you're playing if you're doing any unison work. So you don't want to be going da 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 da. You don't want to be doing that, because you cannot possibly judge intonation discrepancies if you're singing an octave away. But if I'm going, I'm deliberately singing flat, and you can hear it right away. So So that's the thing. You know, you really want to always sing in the same octave as you're playing, even if it means using your falsetto for the guys. The other thing is that you can kind of decide on whether you want to sing exactly in sync with the reference instrument, like I just did, or to help the ear along a little bit, be slightly delayed. So let's just say like a Dorian mode, one octave. If I could either sing it in sync, or I could be slightly delayed. So in a sense, the guitar is feeding me, and my ear has like just a fraction of a second to adjust to try and cop the note. And then eventually, when you get good enough at syncing and really singing in tune, then you give yourself your reference note, and then you can advance the voice in front of the guitar, in which case the guitar is confirming and examining your intonation retrospectively. See? So you can be in sync, slightly behind for the benefit of the ear, slightly ahead to like really show that the voice and the ear connection is really solid. And we talked about using the metronome. Okay, so the first really easy exercise you can do by yourself for intervals is what I call omission. And there's melodic omission and harmonic omission. Melodic omission, and this is not on the handout just yet. Basically, you just give yourself a reference note. So let's say this, and I want to sing a perfect fourth above that. So I will then give myself the reference note, and then I will match that pitch, and then sing the perfect fourth. And while the second note of the interval is still ringing, I check the intonation with the top note. So, it's not this. That exercise is singing a perfect fourth above a note. That's not singing an interval. Now, for a harmonic interval, that is what you want to do. You want to sustain one note, and then, and of course, the same thing works for descending. So if you wanted this, so you would work both ascending and descending. So for a harmonic interval, you let the guitar sustain with the voice, and then you do both positioning where the voice is above the guitar or below the guitar. So let's do like a major 7. And then of course while you're singing, you play the note to confirm that your intonation is good. At the bottom of the printed page, there's a paragraph about monitoring, about accuracy monitoring, and the best thing to do is to record your sessions and then listen back to them. And if you have like a buddy or your teacher who you feel has stronger and more sensitive ears than yours, and you want to play them a little bit, they would be more than happy to say, hey, you're a little flat here, you're a little sharp there. But ideally, you should be able to monitor your own intonation in real time. But until you get used to the routines, it's better to record your sessions, and then maybe later in the day have a cup of coffee and then listen to them. So that's intervals. Now let's look at the symmetrical array. The symmetrical array is basically taking an interval of choice and symmetrically transposing it by a consistent interval. In this case, we'll just do the major second transposition. And in this way, you basically get a real deep concentration of that interval transposed by a predictable symmetrical transposition scheme. So there are 8 distinct exercises which mix the melodic direction of the interval with the melodic direction of the transposition. And there are 5 different ways to divide the octave. Actually, there's actually 5 different ways, but I'm not using the half step because it's very laborious. So I use the major second, the minor third, the major third, and the tritone as the 4 primary transposing mechanisms. But for now, we're just going to do the major second. So the idea is to basically sing and play in unison with this, and so you have an ascending interval with an ascending transposition. And then the reverse of that would be so each one has a forward version and a backward version. And then the next set of exercises is mixing the melodic directions. So now we have descending intervals with an ascending transposition, which would be and as far as fingering goes, anything. You know, the main thing is just to get it out, you know, on the guitar and to sing as good in unison as you can. And the reverse of that would of course be eventually you should be able to sing these exercises without the use of the guitar. And then eventually you don't even need to sing them because they're in your ear and they're playing. That's when you know you've assimilated it. So that's the symmetrical interval paradigm. You can apply it to any interval that you're having a little trouble with, and it drills both ascending and descending forms. The next four exercises alternate the melodic direction. I'll just go through that briefly just a little bit. So in the first example, which says measure 17, so that's the idea of alternating melodic directions while still keeping the transposition scheme the same. Okay? So that's pretty much kind of the kind of stuff that you can do by yourself with interval work. Okay? I'm just going to grab a little bit of water. Okay, now if we go to modes and scales, let's go to the handout, the notated handout. And there's a few exercises that you can do here. Basically, the first one that I'll do is a pedal exercise where you keep the first degree as a pedal and then just sing an expanding fan of the intervals that exist there. So you have this is for Lydian, of course, right? And then here would be the reverse of the above. And then contracting, descending one. So that would be your pedal exercise. The gradient exercise positions the Ionian mode system in such a way that one mode to the next, you just have to lower or raise one scale degree. So Lydian to Ionian is the 4th scale degree, Ionian to Mixolydian is the 7th, and so forth. So when you're doing the forward gradient, Lydian to Locrian, you're lowering that key scale degree. So why don't you guys join in with me, and we'll do the exercises notated. And for now, we'll just do an octave. Eventually, we can expand, as it says, expand the range to 2 octaves, you know, or your maximum vocal range. Okay, so we're just going to do it. We'll do it straight through. Catch breaths wherever you need to, and we're going to go from Lydian to Locrian. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and. Good. And so that would be the forward gradient. The backward gradient would be starting with Locrian and going back to Lydian. And so you could do each mode ascending in the opposite order that we just did it, right? Or you can then use the descending version, in which case you actually read backwards. You would read Locrian backwards. and so forth and so on. And you start adding, you start raising each individual scale degree. And then, of course, you want to have the forward gradient with descending scales and the reverse gradient with ascending scales. I didn't write out all the exercises, otherwise it'd be 10 pages. So that's something that you can do for just getting the modes. And then with the melodic minor modes, I think you pretty much kind of have to pick one at a time and drill them, because they're so distinct from each other. Another thing you can do is you can sing and play alternate notes. So for example, S stands for sing, P stands for play. So for example, I could sing the arpeggio tones and play the passing tones. So and then the reverse of that would be playing the chord tones and me singing the passing tones. And then it's just a way of just getting, into like the guts of the scale a little bit, and making sure that you get the intonation right. You could also do a pattern, the typical kind of patterns, like you keep on going, any kind of patterns that you want. Another thing you can do is to sing diatonic parallelisms, meaning that you choose an interval, let's say parallel thirds is probably the easiest, and you stay within the mode. So let's say, for example, Lydian. So I'm going to sing parallel thirds above the guitar, but using the Lydian mode only and staying within the diatonic structure. So there, obviously some of the thirds are major, some of the thirds are minor, and so forth and so on. You could also play the guitar above, right? So it's always good to work the guitar above and below the voice, or the voice below and above the guitar, depending on which way you look at it. So the diatonic parallelisms can be very, very cool, and you can do fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, and still stay within the given mode. Triads, okay. Omission. So for example, you could play the first two notes of a triad and sing the missing one. So like how about an augmented triad? And again, while your voice is still ringing, you want to play the note to compare the intonation. Let's say minor first inversion. Give yourself the reference note. And so forth and so on. So you could do omission by leaving one note out. You could leave the middle note out. You could leave the first note out. You can do any kind of thing with that. And the same goes true for triad chords. For example, you can play, let's say, a diminished chord, and you want to sing the diminished fifth on top of the minor third. Or leave the third out, leave the middle note out. On the handout, I've got a gradient of triads. So here's your triad gradient, and notice that with the gradients, the starting note is always the same, so you can compare the subtle half-step differences between one quality and the next on the same pitch level. So, the reverse gradient, okay, and then the little bullets on top tell you, play and sing each in the reverse gradient, use descending and alternate directions, apply to first and second inversions, and then you can use open voice. So, for example, root 5/3. So, which helps prepare you for singing drop two voicings a little bit later. So that's for triads. Another thing you can do, it says here on the printed page, finger voicing, sing into guitar sound hole. So for example, let's just take a C major triad. I'm going to take this voicing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to finger it on the guitar, and hopefully it'll pick it up. Make it minor. And then make it diminished. Make it whole diminished. Now you can do the same thing with the piano. You put your foot on the sustain pedal, open the lid carefully so you don't kill yourself, and then stick your head into the harp of the piano, and then sing whatever you want. And if the notes come out cleanly and evenly dynamic, then you know you're singing in tune with the piano. If you get kind of like a funky, fuzzy sound, then your intonation on one of the notes is not happening. So you can do the same thing with the piano. You can sing into the piano. Yeah, Elliot.
So you're holding on the chord while you do that?
On the piano, you don't need to, because on the guitar you have to. Because I mean, if I went the only thing that's going to happen is whatever harmonics of the open strings are available, that's the only ones that are going to sound. But you can get into really kind of cool stuff like right, or I may not have the low F for this one. So it's a little easier when you're in a quiet environment, and this guitar doesn't have like the biggest acoustic sound, so like a nice dreadnought or really nicer classical would be a good guitar to do it with, or even an arch top where you can. It's a little easier when you're in a quiet environment, and this guitar doesn't have like the biggest acoustic sound, so like a nice dreadnought or really nicer classical would be a good guitar to do it with, or even an arch top where you can sing it to the F hole could work pretty well. So mess around with that, because that's real ownership, man. It's like theoretically what you're doing. There's a feel to it. There's a look to it, but you have to own it vocally. And in order to own it vocally, you got to be able to hear it. So what we're essentially doing is we're leveraging our fingerboard knowledge and fingerboard theory directly into the arena of our ear, and using our voice as the medium for developing our ear. Any questions so far? I'm going through this really fast so that we can have some interactive stuff with the other guys. Everybody cool so far? Good, okay. So let's look at sevenths. Sevenths. So there's a few things you can do with sevenths. You can do the sevenths gradient, which is major, dominant, minor, half diminished, diminished. And why don't we all try this one? Okay, so it's going to be. So we're going to sing in unison with that. So how about this? These are half notes, so the quarter notes will be like sing it to the F hole. Could work pretty well. So mess around with that, because that's real ownership, man. It's like theoretically what you're doing. There's a feel to it. There's a look to it, but you have to own it vocally. And in order to own it vocally, you got to be able to hear it. So what we're essentially doing is we're leveraging our fingerboard knowledge and fingerboard theory directly into the arena of our ear, and using our voice as the medium for developing our ear. Any questions so far? I'm going through this really fast so that we can have some interactive stuff with the other guys. Everybody cool so far? Good, okay. So let's look at sevenths. Sevenths. So there's a few things you can do with sevenths. You can do the sevenths gradient, which is major, dominant, minor, half diminished, diminished. And why don't we all try this one? Okay, so it's going to be. So we're going to sing in unison with that. So how about this? These are half notes, so the quarter notes will be like doo doo doo. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and. Now let's do the backwards gradient, and let's read exactly backwards. So it'll be da 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 da. Ready? 3 and 4. Da 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 da. And then of course we would have a backwards gradient with a descending arpeggio, and we could have a forward gradient with a descending arpeggio as well. So you can mix things up. So anytime you see the bullets above the staff, that just says, hey, try this too, try this too. Now, if you can take drop 2 voicings, okay, then it starts to get interesting. And I'll explain this in just a minute. The drop 2 voicings would be. And by the way, those F sharps should be G flats in the handout. I'll correct that. So let's try that like half notes again. 1, and we're going to sing from bottom to top, just like it is on the handout. 1, 2, 3, and. Now let's do the same thing, but do them in reverse order, ascending as well, okay? From diminished, 3 and 4. Okay? Now we get to, you can apply this to all the other inversions. First inversion, second inversion, third inversion. Do the same gradient forward and backwards with ascending or descending shapes. Okay? So there's 3 inversions and 4 permutations for melodic directions and gradient direction. So that's 12. There's 12 exercises right there. Where it says play chords, sing all permutations. This is what can get very interesting. Just take the C major 7 chord. There's 24 different ways to permutate those 4 notes. There's 6 that begin with the bottom note. So for example, I can go ba da dee da ba, and we already know this. Do 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 dee. Then I go bo dee do bo dee da da bo dee do da, so forth and so on. So those are, I think, the 6 that you can do, with the bottom note being the first that you can sing. But there are 6 more for each other string. And once you start singing like major 7ths or 10ths, like once your vocal agility starts to really kick in, that's when you start to really hear what you're doing on the instrument. And this not only affects you really owning chords, but also owning voice leading passages that, you know, when you're comping for soloists, is extremely helpful, as well as hearing changes as voice leading structures. Let's see where we are. Voice leading channel. Perfect. Okay, so turn the page. Oh yeah, and the other couple of things you can do with the 7ths. You can do a scale tone series, you know, which is basically and so forth and so on. The basic scale tone series.